again, David Walls with Texas Values and our legislative arm, Texas Values Action. Excited to be here again, excited to see a good crowd. So as Michael said, I'll talk just briefly a little bit about, especially now as we're kind of entering a very important time to be in contact with our elected officials as bills start to move and there starts to be committee hearings and so forth. Some effective ways to communicate. As I have the last several weeks, shameless plug, I'll continue to plug our Texas Legislative Guide, which I have some copies of back there. Pretty much everything that I'm going to say here is probably written out a lot better than I will say in this booklet. This booklet also has all the contact information of the state elected officials, actually federal from Texas as well, committees, room numbers, all that stuff, one-stop shop for legislative. So happy for folks to take copies, and we have a lot more back at our office if folks want to take some back to their respective groups. As I've said the past couple weeks, the gold standard of effectively communicating with your legislator is talking to them in person. And that's why we're excited about y'all being here and about how folks are continuing to come here and interact with their elected officials. It's a critically important thing to do, and as I like to say, as Jonathan Sines, the president of our organizations, likes to say, government so many times belongs to those that show up. And we know the other side likes to show up, and sometimes they show up and are able to show up in disproportionate numbers to the amount of people that they represent, that have their values. So I like to tell folks that when you show up at a elected official's office, when you meet with the legislator, when you make a phone call, when you make an email, you are not just representing yourself. You are literally representing hundreds of people that come from your district who they know share the same values that you have. We've been told, before that on some issues, if a legislator hears from 10 to 15 people, they start getting a little bit concerned about what's going on. So that just goes to show you that you certainly can have a difference. We highly encourage folks, to the extent possible, if you know you're coming down to Austin, if you've got your, you're going back somewhere in Texas and bringing a larger group down with you, to reach out to your senator, to your representative, let them know you're coming, see if you can set up an appointment, get some time set aside. As we're moving into the kind of more busier time frames, and they're on the floor, and then they've got committee hearings and so forth, sometimes it can be difficult to actually meet with your specific legislator, but you might be able to meet with someone on their staff, and the person that you meet with on their staff might be the kind of somewhat subject matter expert that covers that particular issue. And so you might be speaking to the most important person in that office on that specific topic. So certainly don't undervalue the ability to speak with staff. We always encourage folks to bring just a simple one-page handout that has a brief overview of the issue that you're talking about. I encourage folks to the extent possible, to really try to have if there's a personal story or personal tie, you're coming to talk to your representative about a pro-life issue, and you have a personal story of how abortion has impacted you, or adoption, or anything, that a story that you can tell is something that you can leave them with, that when you walk out of their office, they have something to remember by is critically important. Other ways, obviously, to effectively communicate, and we're starting to do this frequently, and I'll mention one is we'll send out action alerts. I know a lot of the organizations here do that too. So for example, we sent one out last week on the Religious Freedom Constitutional Amendment, where we'll send an email out, we'll provide a brief summary of the issue, and through our website, folks can directly send an email, log in. It'll pull up your specific legislators. Very easy. It'll be a kind of a template letter that's already ready to go. If you just want to hit send, if you you want to go in there and make some changes, and we encourage folks to do that, to go in there and change the letter up and to send those. That's an important and effective way, especially for folks that can't make it down to Austin. So I encourage folks to sign up on our email list if you want to get specific action alerts. I encourage folks from us to go to txvaluesaction.org, but I know a number of the other groups here do a similar thing, and encourage folks to not be afraid to be on a whole bunch of email lists this time of year, because there's a lot of good and sometimes even more bad bills that folks need to be aware of. So, and then finally, also making phone calls. As I gave the example last week, sometimes that can be extremely effective. Again, going back to the religious freedom issue last session, when we had the bill hung up in the House State Affairs Committee and Byron Cook's committee, we just got in contact with some of our grassroots supporters in his district, encouraged folks to start making phone calls, and kind of overwhelmed his phone lines and really got his attention. Unfortunately, it didn't get his attention enough because the bill still didn't go anywhere, but we were accused of making robocalls into districts, and so you can kind of sense the fear sometimes that really just a few people, y'all, that you can make by just going back to your community, letting folks know what's going on, and giving them easy ways. We're not talking about the folks having to spend hours to follow all this stuff. Just a few dedicated minutes sometimes, and you can make your voice heard here in Austin and can have an impact. I think that's, I'll leave it at that, so I'll leave myself a little bit of time on some of the specific issues we're working on. Are there any questions or things that I didn't cover that folks want to bring up on the communicating with your legislature?
How effective is it for folks to actually testify? To go in and spend the 9 hours waiting? It can for most legislators.
Yeah, it can be very important, and this is thank you, Mike, for bringing that up. As we're heading towards some bills getting into committee, and we're waiting on some committee hearings on other important bills, it's always important for our side. Again, government so many times belongs to those that show up. And on some of these issues that we work on, highly contentious issues, marriage, life, religious freedom, we know the other side is going to disproportionately probably show up and bring all kinds of folks to testify against our bill. And it's an easy out. It's an easy out for legislators who say they're with us, but deep down maybe they're a little wishy-washy. It's an easy out to say, oh, well, look, they had this many people that came and testified. We've heard that before. And, and logically we want to go, what goes on in the committee is not going to be a representative sample of how the whole state feels about this issue. But we don't want to give them the opportunity to say that. And so I do encourage folks to show up. We do our best to try to let folks know. And sometimes showing up at the committee hearing process can be, it's not always the funnest thing, because you don't know, they can go on a long time, you don't know when, when things might come up. But if you have the ability to make the commitment to come on a specific issue that you're very passionate about, and you have the ability to wait and to testify, or even just to show up and sign in and log your support one way or another, I think that's very important. And I know a number of organizations here, ourselves included, are working on some important issues. And if you have a personal testimony or some expertise, or know someone that has some expertise in some of these areas that we're working on, we would love to hear from you guys, because we'd like to certainly have folks there to testify. Let me quickly transition into just a couple things. I'm going to focus mainly. I've mentioned it a few times, but I want to go into a little bit more detail because we're starting to get kind of into the nitty-gritty. So our top legislative priority is a state constitutional amendment to strengthen the religious liberty protections in our state constitution. The bill, it's SJR 10 by Senator Donna Campbell, and it's a very, very important, piece of legislation that we've worked on for the past several sessions. Again, as a constitutional amendment, you have a higher threshold. You have to get 2/3 in the House, 2/3 in the Senate, and then it would have to, of course, the governor signed it, and then it would go to the ballot in November for an up or down vote. But we're starting to, let me back up. So essentially what this Religious Freedom Amendment does is sets the highest standard for government to protect individuals from government infringing on people's religious freedoms. So if you go back to the early 1990s, there was a really, really bad Supreme Court case that lowered the standard by which government can interfere in with someone's religious beliefs. And so in response to that, in the mid-90s, under the Clinton administration, under bipartisan support, in fact, I think there was only maybe one senator at the federal level that voted against it. Federally, we passed what's known as the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. From that point forward, a number of states started passing these at the state level. We passed one at the state level, at the statute level. And some states went a step further, put it into their state constitution. Other states had religious freedom language in their constitution that would probably already be interpreted to give them this highest level of religious freedom protection. And so we believe, as Texans, as liberty-loving folks who understand that religious freedom is our first freedom, defined in the First Amendment of the Constitution for a reason, because if we don't have religious freedom, then all other freedoms will fade away. We think it's critically important that Texas should be one of those states that unequivocally has this higher level of protection in our state constitution. But I should also, because we're starting to get folks coming out against this, and a lot of this goes back to some controversy over this issue that erupted in Arizona last year or a year and a half ago when they were trying to update some of their language in their Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And so essentially the language of this constitutional amendment, what it says is government can't burden someone's religious beliefs. If they do burden someone's religious beliefs, they have to have a compelling reason to do so. And even if they have a compelling reason to do so, they have to go about doing it in the least restrictive way possible. A perfect example of this was the Hobby Lobby Supreme Court victory that was last year. Folks remember Hobby Lobby was challenging the Obamacare HHS mandate that was forcing them and other private employers to provide abortion-inducing drugs and contraceptives. And again, this was a challenge under the federal Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And they were ultimately victorious because the Supreme Court held that certainly forcing Hobby Lobby to directly pay for abortion-inducing drugs is not the least restrictive way to go about doing that. If the government wanted to provide these, a least restrictive way would just simply be that they could pay for them themselves and hand them out free like they do in a lot of places. So anyways, this is an important issue, and I just wanted to mention, just yesterday, the Texas Association of Businesses has come out against the Religious Freedom Amendment. And this is, I just want to make folks aware of some of these attacks. So the Texas Association of Business is joining arms in arms, I guess, with the ACLU of Texas, the Texas Freedom Network, and all the liberal...
Are you serious?
Yes. Because they don't want to have an unwelcoming business environment in the state of Texas. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I'm not so sure what's unwelcoming about the state of Texas and our business environment. I don't know what's so unwelcoming about Texas saying we want to protect our most foundational freedom. And so I think that's just ludicrous. They also said in their statements that they're increasingly seeing corporations that want to have policies that protect these gender identity and sexual orientation classes. This would be very similar to the languages that we've been fighting in these ordinances, like in Houston and San Antonio. And just to, I know I'm kind of rambling on here a little bit, but just to give folks a little bit of an idea of who the Texas Association of Businesses is joining lockstep with, and the kind of policies and the real consequences for business. I don't know if any of y'all heard, but any of y'all familiar with Planet Fitness? Did y'all hear the story about Planet Fitness? Okay. So they have a corporate policy very similar to the one in Houston, in San Antonio, and somewhat similar now to the one that's in Plano, that says you can't discriminate on the basis of quote-unquote gender identity. And so in this particular example, you had a female who was in the women's locker room who was undressing. Clearly a man dressed up as a woman, but clearly a man came walking in the locker room while she was undressing. She went and complained to Planet Fitness. No. Who wouldn't? She went and complained, and because of that, they canceled her membership because she said that her actions were discriminatory and not the kind of judgment-free zone that Planet Fitness wanted. These are the kind of values that we're combating against, and these are the kind of policies that these organizations at the Texas Association of Business is now saying that we have to have these kind of policies if Texas is going to be competitive. I think that's just a little bit ridiculous. And so I encourage folks, we send out an action alert, I'll put some copies out. I encourage folks specifically on the Senate version of the bill, Senator Campbell's version, to be in contact with your state senator and let them know that the people of Texas support protecting our most foundational freedom. Any questions?
What was the bill number?
It is SJR 10.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, sir. Now, that's Marilyn Gerstenschlager.